Now we're going to explore fiscal policy in a more mechanical way, as I'm sure you're excited to do. What we want to do now is apply the things we have said, same things we have said, to our aggregate supply, aggregate demand framework so we can look at it in a model. So here we go with our aggregate supply, aggregate demand framework. And I'm going to start off and probably stay with sort of our typical expectation of fiscal policy, which would be expansionary, because contractionary fiscal policy isn't terribly likely, in my opinion. And if you want to explore that, just know it's the opposite. So here we go. Long-run aggregate supply, vertical line, because it's what the economy can do with the resources the economy has, its productive capacity. I'm going to make short-run aggregate supply curved today. And I'm going to do that for the practical purpose of looking at price level changes as we might really kind of expect them to be, although I normally do short-run aggregate supply linearly just for simplicity. So let's insert aggregate demand in our framework. Let's say here. There's aggregate demand. So how are things? How's this economy doing? Well, this is the potential output of the economy. That's what it can do, but this is what it is doing. So we have what's called a recessionary gap. And we have some downward pressure on the price level, but maybe not a lot because of the curvature of short-run aggregate supply. Perhaps. Now, this is unsatisfactory, right? Because output isn't what it could be. We're producing inside of our production possibilities curve. We're inefficient. The economy, the government has some interest in enhancing our economic well-being, and they have the tools to do it through government spending or taxes. And so they might wish to close this recessionary gap and get us back to the long-run potential output of the economy, rather than just wait for natural forces to have that occur. They might seek to step in and do something about it. So this is what we call a stimulus, or expansionary fiscal policy. This is when these things are called for. So what we want to do is close this gap. Well, if long-run aggregate supply represents the productive capacity of the economy, we wouldn't want to reduce that to get back to an equilibrium, would we? No, because that's less stuff, less potential stuff even. No, that doesn't make much sense. The way we want to close this gap is to bring aggregate demand back to where it sort of should be, at our equilibrium over here. We want to, I'm going to use a red, we want to heat the economy up. We want this effect. So how can we get to this? We need expansionary fiscal policy. Now the thing with this is, we need to think about the determinants of aggregate demand. What are the things that cause it to shift? Well, that was something, again, I said, don't forget this. C, I, G, and NX. Which of these things can the government affect? C, I, G, and NX. Well, can they affect G? G stands for government. So they can increase government spending. Or they could affect the other fiscal policy tools that are expansionary that they could use would be to decrease taxes. They could decrease taxes and increase C, that's consumption by households, or increase I, that's investment by firms, or they could just increase government spending. Those are the tools in their toolbox and the ways they might do that. Now, An interesting thing that I haven't dove into yet, now is the time, is that they do not have to increase G or decrease T, so much so that they entirely close this gap with that tool. Because what's going to happen if some more people are employed by government? They're going to have money in their pockets. What will they do with that money? They'll go out and buy stuff. And what will that mean for other people? They will have more money in their pockets. And what will they do? They will go out and buy stuff. And what will that mean for the people that they buy that stuff from? You get the idea? It could be done through the decrease in taxes as well. If my taxes are decreased, I bring home more income. I have new money to me to spend. It's money in my pockets. I can spend it. Will I spend 100% of the new money that I received through the lower taxes? Probably not. Now, an important identity for us is Y sub D, which is disposable income. Discretionary income is what it's often people call disposable income. They call discretionary income disposable income, and I almost just replaced the terms as well. But our disposable income is equal to our income minus taxes. And with our disposable income, we may either consume or save, because we're defining saving as not consuming. So we either may spend it, and what we don't spend is what we save. It comes from here. So if we lower taxes and our income is the same, that's more disposable income. If our disposable income rises, we may either increase consumption or increase saving. In that scenario I just described about people having money in their pockets, if we don't increase consumption, does that happen? No, because it just goes into our pockets and stays in our pockets because of our definitions down here, of our variables, of our terms, of the things we're looking at. So, effectively, the amount of a new dollar that you and I are willing to spend affects the impact of that fiscal stimulus on the economy as a whole. So, this concept that I'm trying to get to here is called the multiplier effect. The multiplier effect. And the multiplier, there's a formula for it. It's not as hard as it might appear. Let me just put it that way. The multiplier is equal to 1 over the MPS, which is the same as 1 over 1 minus the MPC, and let me define these terms for you. The MPS is the marginal propensity to save. Of a new dollar of disposable income, how much of it do we save? That's what the MPS is. The marginal propensity to consume is how much of a new dollar do we consume. 1 is the new dollar, so the amount of it that we save from that new dollar must be equal to the amount that we consume. Why? Because Y sub D is equal to C, no, I keep it in the same order, the amount we save versus not save. So if we get a new dollar, the portion of it that we save, taken away from that new dollar, must be result in the proportion of it that we spent. because we are only given two choices on how we can handle a dollar, our disposable income, is to either save it or consume it, because the way we're defining these terms. Save money, doesn't matter where you save it, in an account, under your mattress, just in your pocket. Not spending it is saving it for our purposes. So when we get new money in the form of fiscal stimulus from the government, the amount of the new money that we are willing to spend increases the multiplier effect. Think about this for just a second. These are the same thing. These are the exact same thing because of this relationship right here. As the bottom of a fraction gets smaller, what does that mean about the fraction as a whole? Think about some numbers here for just a second. As the bottom gets smaller, what does it mean for the fraction of a whole? 1/10. We all know that's 10%. Let's raise the bottom. I'm sorry, let's lower the bottom. Let's change it to 1/5. That's 20%. 20% is bigger. Let's change it to 1/4. That's 25%. That's bigger. Change it to 1/2. That's 50%. That's bigger. So as the bottom of a fraction gets smaller, the quotient or the whole thing gets bigger. That's math, and I know a lot of people are going, I don't want to hear that. I don't even want to hear that. But compare that to these numbers. This bottom right here is how much of a new dollar we save. Well, thinking about the idea of people having money in their pockets and buying stuff, the less we buy stuff, doesn't it seem reasonable that the net effect on the economy will be less? So the lower is our marginal propensity to save, the bigger will be the impact of new dollars sent to us in the mail, or however they choose to do it by the government, when we have a recessionary gap and they want to close the gap. So in C, I, G, and NX, in order to close that recessionary gap, what they need to do is increase G or decrease T some. And then because of the multiplier effect, what they do has a bigger effect than just what they did. So this orange that I'm showing here might be the increase in government spending. And when people have more money in their pockets and they begin spending that money in their pockets, and those people get money that they buy from, they get money in their pockets and they spend money that is in their pockets, and the people they're buying from spend it, and so forth and so on. An initial jump in expansionary fiscal policy may be captured here in the orange, but the later effects of it, ideally, as it trickles through the economy, gets us out to this red aggregate demand double prime, which gets us back to the potential output of the economy through the multiplier effect. Another simple analogy for the multiplier effect, at least I think it is something that we've all experienced when we were kids. If you drop a rock, this is a rock, clearly that's a rock, right? You drop, clearly it's dropping because there's an arrow in direction. You drop the rock into water, there is a splash. That's like the tax cut or the government expenditure. But is that the only displacement created in a body of water when you throw a rock in it? No, there's an initial splash. That's like the increase in G or the decrease in T. But then there is further displacement of water as it ripples. In our analogy, as it ripples through the economy. If you were to measure all of the displacement of water that you were responsible for with your throw or rock, that would be like the multiplier effect on the economy through expansionary fiscal policy. So that's the multiplier effect in a nutshell. That's what we're looking to do in our agri-supply aggregate demand framework. It's probably not a surprise that there might be problems with this little scenario. I mean, I describe it like the government has the tools to fix the economy anytime. Well, it's like that. We just do this, and then we have that. All we have to decide is whether to increase G or decrease T. And if we increase G, do we want to do it by spending money on solar panels and windmills, like I suggested before, or defense? So we have these things to settle. But once we settle that, it's easy, right? No, it's still not easy. It's still not easy because things get in the way of this beautiful, elegant little theory here. One thing that gets in the way is, well, if you get a check in the mail from the government, their expectation of your marginal propensity to consume might be 0.8, but what if this time around, when we get a stimulus check, we feel like, gosh, they're just going to raise our taxes next year. Maybe I ought to just hold on to that because I'm going to have to pay it back next year. Would their estimate of 0.8 be right? Probably not. Our expectations affect what we do today. And that's just one problem. In the next segment, I'm going to explore all the problems with what's going on here. While I still have this here, I want to just tease out another little something that we're going to look at in the next video segment. What if it takes a long time for this to shift? And what if the economy, what if other things have changed and the economy has improved as the ripples are happening? If we overshoot this, we might actually have real consequences in the price level. Because with the curve, short-run aggregate supply curve, the price level is not such a problem when we have a recessionary gap. But as aggregate demand exceeds the long-run potential of the economy, that's a very hot economy, we might endure an inflationary gap just because of what we did if we don't time things well. We, as policymakers, that is. So these, I'm just touching upon some of the problems that we might face with this, and I'll present these a little bit more formally and carefully in the next video segment. But this is the idea. This is what it's supposed to work like. And what I started to get in here in orange is just to tease you a little bit about why it's not as easy as it looks. And that's where we'll go next.